Good evening, everyone. Hope you're doing great. Thank you for attending the 13th part of HULATAM webinar series info sessions. In these sessions, we plan to introduce Harrisburg University, our available resources here, and the researches that are going on. My name is Ruzbe Sadikian. I'm an associate professor of data analytics at Harrisburg University of Science and Technology, and I have the honor to be the host of this series. Harrisburg University is a private STEM-focused university in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, with an additional location in Philadelphia. And also we have more than 30 programs that are offered in undergrad, grad, and PhD level. We have around 6,000 students who represent 110 countries. HULATAM, which is the term that we use for our branch in Latin America, will offer a Master of Science in Data Analytics, Project Management, Cybersecurity, which will be delivered in a hybrid format, which means it's going to be online and on-campus classes, which are going to be taught by instructors from Harrisburg University of Science and Technology in the United States. We're proud to have our latest location in City of Knowledge in Panama. The HU Panama location will also offer cutting-edge professional development, seminars, and also different type of courses. We're going to have, for the first few cohorts, we're going to offer scholarship too. If you have missed our past webinars, they are all recorded and are saved on YouTube channel of Harrisburg University. You can follow the QR code that you see on the page to get more information about our sessions. So without any further ado, let's go to our presenters, Albert Sarvis and Bernardo Mesa. Albert Sarvis is Assistant Geospatial Technology and Project Management. He is an assistant professor at Harrisburg University of Science and Technology. Mr. Sarvis has 20 years of geographic information systems, GIS industry experience, and more than 12 years as a GIS IT project manager. His educational background focused on environmental studies, geography, geospatial technology, and project management. Following a 20-year career as a GIS consultant, Mr. Sarvis joined Harrisburg University in 2011 as a full-time assistant professor of geospatial technology. He is responsible for coordinating, teaching, and aligning corporate faculty members for the program. He is the director of the Center of Applied Environmental and Geospatial Technology and has been an FAA certified remote pilot since 2017. We have also Bernardo Mesa, who is a physiological ecologist who integrates technology and physiology to gain insight on how anthropogenic induced environmental changes affect wildlife. He received his veterinary medicine degree from Universidad Nacional de Colombia, and then his master's and PhD degree in wildlife conservation from Virginia Tech. He has been with Harrisburg University for 2 years and teaches in the integrative science program. So please start your presentation. You're muted.
Yes, a rookie mistake there. Thank you very much, Rizwa, for the introductions. So I'm going to start our presentation with a bit of a background on what Harrisburg University does overall toward environmental science and integrating technology from the perspective of the geospatial technology side and the Center for Applied Environmental and Geospatial Technology. So I'll share my slides here and turn my camera off while I'm showing you that. So give me 1 second. Here we go. Okay. So we're going to, again, as I mentioned, start with an overview of what we do at Harrisburg University that relates to technology and environmental science. And then I'll hand over to my colleague, Bernardo Mesa, to talk about a case study that we want to present to you to give you an idea of some of the details of what we work on. So a little bit about our academic programs, courses and other opportunities that relate to this field. We have numerous undergraduate and graduate degree programs, as has been mentioned. Specifically today, we'll be talking about how our programs in geospatial technology and environmental science and sustainability work together to apply technologies to different environmental problems. I'll give you a slight overview of our Center for Applied Environmental and Geospatial Technology, where we actually do applied projects and grant work, utilizing undergraduate and graduate students alongside faculty and other researchers. And I wanted to take the opportunity to mention two new specialized courses that have just been approved in the last year. One is Analytics 570 in the Masters in Analytics program, and that's Principles of Spatial Analysis. So that will introduce students to spatial analysis tools, particularly the ESRI suite of GIS or Geographic Information System tools, and some high-level understanding of what spatial analysis is about. And also, as part of a grant, internal grant, and a grant from the Federal Aviation Administration here in the United States, the Geospatial Technology course, GSTC 107, which is the Remote Pilot Certification or Drone Pilot Certification course. So I'll talk a little bit about these things because that'll give you a nice introduction to the technologies that we're applying to environmental science. So first is our Center for Applied Environmental and Geospatial Technology, and I do apologize, we'll have some pictures here in a second. But as I mentioned earlier, it is a combination of faculty, student, and staff-based projects and research, either grants or commercial projects. In our applications and our abilities within the center, begin with data collection, spatial data collection, environmental monitoring, using geospatial tools, implementing geospatial services, mapping expertise, and as I mentioned earlier, doing drone capture and mapping, including multispectral and thermal, which we'll get into in a bit. That Center for Applied Environmental and Geospatial Technologies, I won't click through to the website, but if you Google the Harrisburg University, CAEGT, it's a mouthful, you can go to our website and find out more about the center, the capabilities that we have, a portfolio of our existing projects, the team members that make that up, and testimonials from our clients that speak to the things that we've done as a center. So some of the drone applications and case studies that we've looked at, I wanted to give you some examples of specifically how we're applying small unmanned aerial systems to these environmental projects. Harrisburg University has a fleet of drones, and we've traveled internationally with these. A little bit of, I put the money in here, the value of these drones, just as representative of the investment that the school has made in this technology. And our main fleet drone is this Matrice 210, which holds numerous payloads of different types of sensor systems, which we'll again talk about in the case study in a bit. Some of the examples, internationally, we've been to Greece and worked with an archaeologist at a local university. What you're looking at here is a quarry in the Isthmus of Greece, and this quarry was used to mine the stone that built the ancient city of Corinth, as well as fortification walls across that part of the region. We also work with drones to develop 3D models. What you see here is automated flight with something like 300 photos taken above this particular stadium. And what it's representing is the fact that we can create 3D models from these multiple camera positions that fly over this particular area. We also use remote sensing or multispectral imagery in our drones. So we recently purchased a multispectral sensor, and we've been applying it to specifically to agriculture. As you may or may not know, when you combine multiple wavelengths of the electromagnetic spectrum, you can pick up unique spectral signatures for different features. And what we're looking at here is a farm with, the dark green is the healthiest vegetation. So it gives us some indication of crop health, which is very important for optimization of crops here in the United States. This particular example is a case study that we're working on really close to Harrisburg, where we're flying repeat flights over a large 120-acre farm, and we're able to look and get details and insight into what's happening on that farm in real time, flying these missions with multispectral sensors. So I can show you an example of this later if there are questions. But as we zoom in on this data, we can see details of crop damage or signs of where vehicles have driven through the fields, things like that, but also look at the health of the plants overall. I wanted to also talk about the two new courses as we get into moved toward the case study. Analytics 570, which is Principles of Spatial Analysis I mentioned. This is a new graduate level geospatial technology course in the analytics program, and it's going to be offered for the first time this fall. And I won't read down all the learning objectives, but essentially we want students in data analytics to understand how to bring spatial analysis tools to bear on the data that they're working with. And the outcome is they are able to use these tools then to run spatial analysis and not just straight statistical analysis that they may have done using some other software. In 2021, the university was awarded a presidential research grant to develop a remote pilot certification course. So this is another key component to the technology we bring to bear on environmental problems and environmental research. This grant was actually followed up with a grant from the Federal Aviation Administration to expand that course, develop it as a full undergraduate geospatial technology course, and we look to bring that into the graduate program at some time as well. That course is based on regular manned aviation technology, manned aviation resources, and it's based off the Airman Knowledge Testing Supplement. So it's, to become a remote pilot, certified remote pilot in the United States and use it for commercial purposes, you have to pass this exam. And it's dense material, very technical, and you have to pass the exam to get your certification. Knowing everything from airport operations to detailed aeronautical charts and understanding all of that and interpreting how to operate drones safely. In the case study that we talk about today, I'll talk a little bit about the challenges of getting permission even to fly in some of these areas for research. So again, lots of detail in this particular course, everything from weather to airport operations to airspace. It really is a comprehensive course to help students get that certification. So again, lots of details about what we actually cover in that course. So I want to, I just wanted to take a few minutes here at the beginning to introduce the center and the work that we do at the university, different courses. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Bernardo to talk about this particular case study. And if Bernardo, if you don't mind, I might interject here or there or ask questions as you go.
You're muted, Bernardo. Bernardo, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Albert, for the opportunity and everyone for the opportunity to speak to you guys. So now I'm going to talk about how we can implement, we can use drones in order to help and aid wildlife conservation. So through the use of thermal cameras and drones. Next. So mostly drones traditionally have been used for detection of wildlife in order to count animals. And these animals are counted via real-time flight, but these animals are usually very easy to see, like an elephant, for example. Next. And we also have used this type of drones to mount microphones. So we could fly them into places that are remote and hard to access, and we can record bird calls, for example, in order to detect what species are present or absent in a specific patch of forest. Next. Also, just using drones to do surveys, for example, in coastal areas, like you see in that upper right picture, where you see seabirds, for example, nesting on the sand. Traditionally, what was used was people with scopes, like you see in the bottom right picture. They would, with the scopes, would visually count each of those birds. And it turns out that when you compare the efficiency of those humans counting those birds and a drone flying overhead of these birds, the drone is probably between 43 and 96% more effective compared to these human surveyors. So drones provide a grade of accuracy and fidelity to the data that they collect. And next. So yeah, in general, most of this technology has been applied to animals that are conspicuous or very easy to see. In the left-hand picture, you see a crocodile, and so it's fairly easy to see, just with a regular camera. And on the right, you would see an elephant in an African savanna, for example. Very easy to see. The problem comes when we want to study cryptic or a very difficult to see species, or species that are very small in size. Next. Like this rattlesnake that is native to eastern United States, which is that portion that Albert is pointing out with his pointer. Is that snake? This picture was captured by the drone, but it's very difficult to see even with the drone at high magnification. So then what do we do next? It'll be using thermal imagery. Next. And this thermal imagery has been implemented in many different species. And we can see here, I believe this is a picture of forest elephants, for example. So each of those red and yellowish patches are indicative of the presence of a mammal. Also, we know that we can observe reptiles, for example, so poikilotherms, animals that regulate their temperature according to their environment. Next. Like in this picture that you see here of a lizard here in the center, very nicely outlined in green and yellow. Next. So we have used these thermal cameras and the drones at Harrisburg University to detect these rattlesnakes. But the technology is available, but when we are looking at these species that are very difficult to detect, we need to make sure we validate the methodologies for each of those species in each of those ecological contexts. For example, here on the right side of your slide, on the right side, we see a yellow orangey dot kind of towards the center of that picture. That is a rattlesnake that is coiled up, and you can see it here in this video, and that's with a thermal camera. So very easy to see, and then you see the actual picture with a regular camera, how it will look like, right? So we would not be able to detect that snake without the thermal camera. Now, on the left side, in contrast, what we have is that area that is being pointed there is a nest of a ground nest bird. And then you can see the color picture is the actual nest. So if we were not to validate this, we would have said that the picture on the left was a snake, where in fact it wasn't. So it would have been a false positive. And we want to eliminate many of those occasions as possible. So it's important for us to validate these techniques. Next. So we have also implemented this type of technology in the Grand Cayman Islands, more specifically in Grand Cayman, where we have an invasion of green iguanas. So iguana, the iguanas that we have in Panama, Colombia, Central America, on mainland, they are native to these areas, but in the Caribbean islands, these iguanas made it to the islands through ship cargo containers, and they became invasive to a point that they were decimating, they were killing all the trees and vegetation, they were eating it all. As you can see in this picture, that's a tree and with very few leaves and many green iguanas at the time. In fact, this population of invasive iguanas was growing almost exponentially from 2014 to 2017. And then Grand Cayman reached over 1 million iguanas in population, invasive iguanas. And these iguanas are outcompeting the highly endangered native blue iguana. So they need to create a strategy where we have to eradicate and find these green iguanas. Next. So the Grand Cayman government performed a green iguana CULL. So basically they offer a bounty, and whoever gave a green iguana, they get money in exchange, and they were able to cull or collect over 1 million iguanas. So a highly successful program. However, the challenge that remains next is that the very few iguanas that are left are very difficult to see. As you can, in this picture is showing one green iguana that is in that red circle. Very difficult to see with a regular camera or even with the naked eye. So we implemented or we tested the technique with the drone and the thermal camera next. And so as we were validating it, we started to learn quite a bit about the physiology and the ecology of these green iguanas. And we observed that around 6 a.m., when it's very early, the day's just warming up, we are not able to observe these iguanas via thermal cameras. By 7 a.m., we have a little bit of sunshine. The iguanas are starting to increase their body temperature. By 9 a.m., we can see the iguanas via the thermal camera very easily. So you can see them there. They are very good outline in whitish or light gray at the 9:15 picture. So now we know that we don't have to go out too early to find these iguanas, and instead mid-morning is the most optimal time for us to find these iguanas with these thermal cameras. Now, as every technique that we use, next, we have limitations. And the limitation, for example, is that the smaller individuals, the juveniles, we are not able to detect them. In this picture here was taken in around the center of that picture is a juvenile, and this picture is taken with a thermal camera, and we are not able to detect them due to their physiological adaptations that they maintain equal body temperature as the environment. When we have this type of conditions, then the iguanas do not show in the thermal cameras. So we are only able to detect adult iguanas around mid-morning to noon very easily. Next. Also, then we have a difficulty. For example, here on the right side of the screen, we have a palm tree, for example, and palm trees are very waxy and highly reflective. So it will look like the bright spots could be an iguana, but in fact, it's just leaves of that palm. And likewise, on the left side, we have a mangrove. And then we have those dots that could look like they could be an iguana at a high elevation, but instead they are reflections from the bark of those trees. But as we learn more and more and we validate these techniques, then we are being more and more effective at detecting these species. And with that, I will give it back to Albert, and then he'll conclude the presentation.
All right, thank you, Bernardo. Make sure I'm unmuted. Okay, so turn my camera back off. So imagery acquisition techniques. So this is getting into the technical side of the drones that we used, the image sensors that we used, and the process that went into capturing this information. So we can get rid of that. So pre-flight considerations, right? Before we could fly at all, very specific spatial and environmental considerations like airspace restrictions, landowner permissions, the temperature, humidity, cloud cover, time of day, all of these things play into how well you're able to use drone-mounted remote sensors. So, for example, temperature, as Bernardo was mentioning, as the day got on and got hotter, the air temperature warmed up, and the ability to differentiate the warmer iguanas from other things in the substrate started to go down. Humidity plays a role in the emissivity values, how we record that information or sense that information from our sensors. Even cloud cover in the time of day, the solar angle, all of those things play into our considerations as to when we would fly and how we would fly. Then on the hardware and software side, right, we needed to think about drone flight controls, the cameras we're using, the resolution, right? How high can we fly and still make out the shape, confidently make out the shape of these animals? The software that we use to fly the drones, image capture tools, all of those things needed to be considered. So in this particular case in Grand Cayman, we had two particular areas that we're focused on for flying, and the very first time we went for using the thermal imagery. One was the Queen Elizabeth II Botanical Park that's in the middle of the island, and the other was an area known as Collier's Road on the very east end of the island, which we went into. And these were known places where these invasive green iguanas existed. But in addition to that, we had to get our liability insurance. The university took out, $1 million liability insurance policy on drone flying that covered international use. Right, so insurance is always needed. We had to have an application approved to conduct the scientific study in the Cayman Islands. So we went through the Cayman Island Department of Environment to get that. And thankfully, they were able to help us with that aspect of the flight. The Aviation Authority in Grand Cayman, it's a very small island, and there are actually quite a few places that are too close to the airport to fly without very specific permissions. So we had to get permission from the Civil Aviation Authority on the island. Just because we were FAA certified doesn't mean we could ignore the rules on that particular island. And then in addition to that, we had to file an operations plan. Exactly what are we planning to do? What are we flying? Where are we flying? How high? What days, exactly where, all of these things needed to be submitted in advance of conducting the study. And then finally, a certificate of registration from the U.S. Homeland Security to prove that it was actually our drone. When you travel internationally with a giant case with all sorts of electronics in it, you raise some suspicions. So we needed to make sure we were covered on the U.S. Homeland Security and Immigrations and Customs and Border Patrol. So let's talk a little bit about the hardware and software configurations we used for this particular project. We've expanded what we've done since the beginning. We've used several drones that had the thermal sensor mounted on it, and most recently we've moved into a DJI Matrice 210 that can hold multiple cameras. So here's what we're using. As I mentioned, it's the DJI Matrice 210. We have a ZenMoose XT, which is the thermal camera you see here. And then not pictured, but what we've added since this study is this ZenMoose Z30 camera. This camera has a 30-time optical zoom. And so as Dr. Mesa was mentioning, as we would see some sort of thermal image or thermal shape or pattern on the screen as we were flying, we could switch over to that Z30 zoom camera and zoom right in that particular object and validate what we were seeing. So those images you saw of the rattlesnakes were captured from the zoom camera. So it's additional configuration for that. In fact, this particular setup is often used for search and rescue here in the United States, where you're using thermal cameras to detect an individual or something based on its thermal signature, and the zoom camera to zoom in and see what we see. What exactly are we capturing, right? So thermal emissivity is in this 7.5 to 13.5 micron range, and we're measuring it as apparent temperature. Our camera actually is a radiometric camera, which allows us to have a pretty good estimate of the apparent temperature of an object. So as we take pictures, we can go back and analyze it and actually know within a degree or two Celsius what the exact temperature was of that object we sensed. So traditionally cameras are looking at visible light, but we went into the infrared for thermal radiation. To fly the area, the image you see in the lower left-hand corner is a pond and a mangrove, basically dense mangrove around the pond at that Queen Elizabeth II Botanical Park. To create this map of the area that we were studying, we wanted to have that as a base map And so up in the top left, you see that we conducted a pre-planned flight using Pix4D Capture, which is a Swiss company, and you basically pre-program the flight that you want. You set your altitude, and the drone automatically, with waypoints, GPS waypoints, flies that particular pattern. We bring the drone back down, and you can see when we were in the Caymans, we're actually using an Inspire 1, a smaller drone, and then back in the lab analyzing the results. And this is using FLIR tools to look at the thermal signature of this particular drone in the image. It was a nice environment to work in, as you can see in the top right. Other things to consider is we want to know at the altitude we're flying, what sort of resolution do we have of the image? So using this 13mm lens on our thermal camera at 10 meters altitude, the sensor size is 640 by 512 pixels, which gives us a 2.7 centimeter per pixel resolution. So flying at 10 meters, we can actually, with the thermal camera, make out things as small as 2.7 centimeters, which is clearly large enough, small enough to capture the shape of an iguana. And our field of view is 18 meters by 14 meters. So all of these things based on the camera and the lens, the focal length, and all this went into our understanding of the resolution of the images that we were capturing. And of course, using this FLIR tools application, you can see that in this particular box, the red dot is pointing to the hottest point, which is the yellow on the side of the iguana facing the sun, and the blue dot is pointing to the coolest area of the image. And over here, just off the screen, the minimum temperature was 68 degrees, where that high temperature was 77.9. So this was an early morning, just as the sun's coming up and it's starting to warm up on one side. So that was kind of an interesting aspect to being able to look at these particular reptiles. So what's next? We do, and I might invite Bernardo to jump back in here. We want to continue this work. This particular image is what the folks in the Cayman Islands, they went out and purchased a different thermal camera, but using the same methodology, and they're able to overlay the thermal image with a black and white traditional visual image in the background. And they've continued to use that tool to find and track down some of those last remaining green iguanas. And actually, that's the case study. There are other things I could show, but I want to see, let me actually, and by the way, just before I stop sharing and look for any questions that may come through, you can see in the background, I'm circling with the cursor, our existing Harrisburg University building in downtown Harrisburg. And about a block away, we have a new 11-story building that's nearing construction. This image was taken several months ago, and this new facility will open up in January of 2023. So I will stop sharing the PowerPoint and see if we have any questions have come through. Elizabeth, I don't know if you were monitoring the chat or if anybody has questions. I think we finished with plenty of time for questions.
Yeah, I don't see any question coming up. Anybody, do you have any questions that you want to share? Yes, we actually have a question. Looks like you want to ask it. So let me connect your microphone. How can I turn on the microphone? Yes, now you should be able to unmute yourself and ask a question.
Hello, yes, very interesting, the technology. My question would be, when you're using a drone over the seabirds or some other animals that are grouped, could it be possible that they would be scared because of the drone? The drone sometimes has a noise. So I know that when people approach and are doing the counting, at least they approach slowly, but in the case of a drone, do the animals actually get scared? That is my question.
Yeah, thank you, Hortensia, for the question. It's a great question, and it's a question that we all have to ask ourselves when we start to work with any species, whether we are going to disturb the species due to our techniques. Some species will not react at all to these drones, like the iguanas, for example. We explored, I think we flew them as close as like 5 meters or something of, from the iguanas, and they were not scared at all from them. Now, I have other colleagues that have worked with primates in Madagascar, for example, and those primates would react to the drones because naturally they have predators that are eagles, and so they are afraid of those flying objects above them. So depending on the biology and the ecology of the species, then we will reassess that. For some birds, it might be a problem. For others, might not, depending on the elevation that you need to fly.
And I can speak to the technology side of that. Is one of the things we would do to compensate is fly higher, right? And at 400 feet, some drones are very, I mean, as humans, very hard to actually hear at that altitude. However, with the right cameras and the resolution of the cameras I was alluding to with the thermal, regular visual spectrum cameras have much higher resolution than this thermal. So, you know, they have as much as a 50 megapixel camera that can resolve to about a half a centimeter at 400 feet. So that's clearly big enough to make out individual birds, but potentially high enough that we don't disturb them. And that really is part of the methodology development. You know, not that we're purposely trying to scare these animals or disturb them, but we learn what they can tolerate and what they won't tolerate. And I think that that's certainly part of the responsibility we have, is to make sure that we're not, you know, that we're getting accurate results, but we're not actually disturbing the animals in the process. But that was a great question.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for asking the question. Others, if you have any question, you can also type in chat. You don't have to. It's up to you, however you're more comfortable.
I can I have a couple other things I can show just as examples. So let me actually share my screen again. Sure. And I'm going to get out of this while people may be thinking. Oops, stop presenting that. I'm going to go here. Can you see my screen? I can't remember if I stopped presenting entirely.
Not yet.
Okay, whoops. Hold on a second. Take care of that. Here we go. Okay, so this particular one, you saw a screen capture earlier. This is the multispectral sensor. We've created what's called a normalized difference vegetation index. And as we zoom into this field that's currently planted in barley, and we'll be switching over to beans sometime next month, as we zoom in, we can see, I can turn this image off, and you can see that the resolution there is much grainier, and suddenly bring this in. One of the particular concerns this farmer had was this sort of disturbance. And it turns out these are in central Pennsylvania and most of the East Coast, we have things called groundhogs, as we call them. And this is a burrow that had been dug up. And so you can see the disturbance. The green is healthy vegetation, yellow is not. When I show this one, I always like to zoom over here to where the farm is and show right here. You know, this is a very odd looking shape. This actually happens to be a floor mat from my car, and here I am when I was flying, and that's where I took off from. So you can see the resolution at 250 feet, what we can see. And that red area obviously is reflecting a lot less of near infrared. And so it shows us a completely different view of what's going on with this particular field. And the really nice thing here is, you know, this area here is about 20 acres, maybe 2,000 feet across. The farmer could get up, put the drone up in his front yard and fly out and inspect his entire field in a matter of moments. So this is something that we're looking into with multispectral imagery, and actually being able to look at detailed information about farmers' fields and piece information together and determine if there's certain things that we see, patterns in this field that we see similar in other places, and we can treat those issues in the same way. Likewise, just stop sharing again. So that's just another example of some of the things that we're capturing with the drones.
There's a question in the chat too.
Okay.
It's asking your perspective about the biggest concern for Latin America if we don't jump into the technology arena in the agro sector soon.
I think that there are, you know, a lot of the methodologies to determine what we can actually use the drones for are being rapidly developed here in the United States and elsewhere. You know, traditionally for decades, we've used satellite imagery, but that's done at a very large regional scale, right? What's the overall production for a region as opposed to an individual field? I think that drones are becoming more and more cost effective, and the small family farm that may really benefit but could not traditionally afford this would be an interesting thing to apply. But every case study, every time we apply this, we need to really thoroughly analyze what kind of information we get and how does that information lead us to make better decisions about agriculture. And I think Dr. Mesa could probably talk about projects there in Latin America. I know we did some remote sensing work, if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely is a concern for Latin America being left behind if we don't adopt modern technology to improve the efficiency of yield in crops, for sure. The university has a great interest in participating in projects with farmers in many countries of the region. We attempted one project looking at Indian blackberry, for example, and limes and other different crops. But the difficulty in those areas is that in Latin America is that the farmers tend to be small scale farmers, and they are the ones that need the most help, right? So when you have such a small scale farm, it's very difficult to sense remotely any usable data, like Albert was mentioning before. So the limitation in Latin America is how I'm gonna find the $24,000 to $30,000 to fund, you know, the sensors, the drone, and train people to use this technology, right? Many of our farmers are not very literate with the internet, with computers, so it's difficult. Now there are co-ops that could get together and maybe finance the cost of the drone and use it not just for one small farmer, but maybe an association of farmers that could adopt this technology. So just to summarize, I guess, we are highly interested in adopting this type of technology for what we are calling, what is called precision agriculture, right? So have high resolution data that can inform a farmer maybe not to spend money that time in fertilizer or in insecticides or anything else because they might not need it, and yet they will be wasting their money. So they could be more profitable by using this type of technology at times. Yeah, it's a great question, and I think we need to jump as soon as possible in Latin America for this, if we want to help our farmers, which are a great part of our society, if we think about it in Latin culture.
Wonderful. Thank you for the explanation. And I have a quick, probably follow-up question. How much our students are involved in these projects? Because when you talk about project, is it like all faculties who are working on these projects, drone-based projects, or students also are getting involved? And how can they get involved in these type of projects?
So I have a few comments on that. The internal grants that we get from the university that are sponsored by the Board of Trustees, we call them presidential research grants. Those grants require us to use undergraduate or graduate resources as part of that grant work. We are an academic institution, and as much as our faculty want to do this research, we also want to bring our undergraduate and graduate students into that research. So, you know, I mentioned early on that our Center for Applied Environmental and Geospatial Technology, we actually employ upwards of 12 undergraduate students at any time, depending on how many projects we're working on. But we also collaborate with for example, the Masters in Analytics program. We have several researchers who are doing predictive analytics for stream flows and river flows. And our Geospatial Technology Center was able to put together a dashboard to represent that data. So they do the predictions and then we create the visualizations. So that was a mix of undergraduate and graduate researchers with the supervision of faculty and full-time staff. So it's very important to us to have that involvement. And for me personally, the most satisfying thing. And I've primarily taught at the undergraduate level in the last 10 or so years, but moving into the graduate analytics program, I'm very excited about the kind of applications and problems that our graduate students come up with. Undergraduate students, learn the tools and techniques, but don't always necessarily have the background and awareness to know exactly how to apply them or how they might be used to solve problems. Whereas our graduate students come ready with these problems. They have experienced things. They know what sort of things they want to apply these tools toward. And so that's really exciting to it's constantly there's a different idea of how to use the technology. And we definitely involve students as much as possible.
That's great. Yeah. Hopefully many of our attendees tonight can join your team in near future. Thank you for the great presentation. I don't see any other question coming up. So I just need to thank you again, Albert and Bernardo, for this fantastic presentation. I enjoyed it a lot, and I'm sure that the audience also enjoyed it. I'm sure about it. That was a great presentation. So if you have any questions, follow-up questions or anything, feel free to reach out to any of us, and we would be happy to help you with any question or request. Thank you again, our speakers, and a special thank to our one and only Dr. Kevin Huggins, who is Director of HULATAM, for attending this session. And thank you, the audience, for being with us this evening. If you enjoyed this presentation, it's recorded and it's going to be shared on YouTube channel of Harrisburg University, so you can rewatch it whenever you want. And hopefully you attend our monthly meetings, our monthly info session. Next month, the title is going to be the education in post-COVID era, and hope to see most of you over there too. Thank you everyone for attending this session, and hope to see you again. Thank you and good night.